Now, you mentioned immune system. So talk to me about is there any clinical data on nitric oxide and its impact on the immune system? I'm like my kids are always sick. I'm always sick, especially right now. We're about to enter flu season. I'm
That's
just like,
right.
oh God, here we go. Back to preschool. Like,
Yeah.
what can I do? What can I do for my immune system?
Well, there's a rich literature on the role of nitric oxide in our immune function. In fact, I'm probably the best example of that. I haven't been sick and lost a day of work in more than 20 years. Even
What?
through COVID, I've never had COVID. I didn't get the COVID shot, and I never had COVID. And I'm on a plane every week for the past 4 years. So what does that mean? So nitric oxide in our immune system, our macrophages and neutrophils, our immune cells actually generate nitric oxide. So when we're exposed to a virus or a bacteria, let's use COVID for example, because we've all lived through COVID for the past 3 years. We recognized early on that the people that got sick and died from COVID were the people who could not make nitric oxide. These were the elderly, people who had a previous heart attack, who had high blood pressure, diabetes, African Americans. So these are the people who cannot make nitric oxide. So what happens is when we're exposed to COVID, the respiratory virus, whether it's COVID or any respiratory virus,
Influenza, whatever. Yeah.
influenza, RSV. So it attaches to our epithelial cells in our upper airway. And our immune system recognizes that. So it mobilizes an immune response. We go to the site of attachment. Our immune cells generate a lot of nitric oxide, prevents the virus from replicating, shuts down proliferation. Or if there's bacteria there, it shuts down the respiration of the bacteria. That's a very defined role of nitric oxide. But in patients who can't make nitric oxide, you can't elicit an immune response. The immune cells don't make nitric oxide, so the virus replicates, propagates throughout the body, and people get sick. And people were dying with COVID. So what we do is, and we had a drug in phase 3 clinical trials for COVID, a nitric oxide drug, and patients were getting better. We can improve blood oxygen saturation by, you know, 20-25% within
Yeah. And that was like
the drug.
that was a big metric, right? With COVID. It was like put on that pulse oximeter and make sure you're above whatever,
Yeah,
93.
well, no, that's right,
Yeah.
because the early on, patients had what's called silent hypoxemia, and one of the important roles of nitric oxide is it improves blood oxygen saturation. Without nitric oxide, you cannot oxygenate the red blood cells, and you cannot deliver oxygen. So that's the reason these people were suffering, because if they developed hypoxia, they were put on 100% oxygen, you wouldn't improve oxygenation, put on mechanical ventilator, they didn't improve, and they died.
Yeah.
So we have to account for the nitric oxide signaling aspects of hemoglobin in our red blood cells to actually pick up oxygen when we breathe room air and then deliver it to the tissue. That's the basis for oxygenation and tissue oxygenation throughout the entire body.